it's time to hold a boundary because your 8-year-old is negotiating, and when it's time to say, you know what, I respect and honor your voice, so I'm gonna let you win this one. Here's the deal. I want you to think about tug of war. Have you ever played tug of war? And I love tug of war because there's so much tension in the rope, and you lean back and the other people are leaning back, and there's all kinds of like input happening. There's a deep kind of tension. And those of you who have children who are like little lawyers, negotiate every little thing that you say, oftentimes what's holding them in the fight, in the argument, in the negotiation is not actually the thing, but the tension. The familiar feeling of like, I've got all of my parent here and we're tussling, we're going back and forth. That feels good, there's input. And in those kinds of moments, I want you to think about dropping the rope and transitioning not from tension-filled battle, but towards a win-win for everyone. Now, when you think about boundaries, okay, it is of course good to have boundaries. Children need you to have boundaries. But a boundary is something that you give to a child and that the child doesn't actually have to do very much in order to cooperate with. Here's an example. Let's say my boundary is when we play outside, you have to stay inside of the fence. Let's say my boundary is when we go to the park, you have to stay with me. And maybe I have a child who's always running off. And now we go to the park and they run off, okay? So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna change my behavior to hold the boundary. And my behavior may change to we only go to gated parks, or my behavior might change to I'm gonna stand at the entrance to the park. So now I've physically put myself in a place so my child cannot leave, okay? There is something that you can do to hold it. The boundary doesn't require the other person to do something. Okay, so if your child is negotiating back to you something, like let's say you said, I don't know, 1 popsicle a day, right? And then your child goes back to you and is saying, I want the popsicle, I want the popsicle. And you're like, well, maybe I should should I respect their voice? Or should I hold my boundary, which is 1 popsicle a day? You know, I would instead encourage you to think about that totally differently. I mean, I probably would let them have the popsicle. I don't have any boundaries on popsicles, but the first question is, why 1 popsicle a day? And the second question is, if that really truly is your boundary, you gotta do something with the rest of the popsicles. Because remember, a boundary is something that you do that doesn't require that your child does anything. That, of course, is so, so important, especially for an 8 or 9-year-old that's really using to learn their voice. And so if I realize that I've been holding something that like really doesn't matter, like the popsicle thing, okay? So I've said 1 popsicle a day, they're pushing for another popsicle. I've said no a couple of times, and then I'm like thinking to myself, I could just give her the freaking popsicle. And I'm gonna say, hey, you know what? You're right. I was having a tricky moment. I was feeling a little stuck, and let's go another popsicle. Okay, so now I've like highlighted all of the stuff that's going down. I got a little stuck. I was in a rope tension moment. Let's have another popsicle, okay? So now I've like honored and respected my child's voice, and I've helped them to know how to move forward. Children do need to have agency and voice, but this is more about child-sized choices from my perspective. So if your kid is 8, this is supposed to be 2 choices, this or that. Okay, that's called a forced choice. And there's probably a lot of places where you could either offer a forced choice, you can have this or you can have that, or you can say like, you know what, my kid needs more than that because they're 8. So I'm gonna plan 3 nights of dinner, you help me plan 2. Now you're supporting executive functioning. You can have your child look up recipes, you can give them some of the power so that they don't have to fight so hard over every little thing, to have some power and have some voice and have some choice. If you need help with this kind of stuff, I want you to DM me or comment the word parent, and I will have my team reach out and help you figure out next steps.